Hi, everyone. My name is Arry Yu. I'm the chair of the Cascadia Blockchain Council. I am also your host for the Blockchain Underground and Windshield Time podcasts. Today, we had a really great guest, Mark Anstead from Numio. He's a super wealth of knowledge, and he actually knows so much about Ethereum and Ethereum 2.0. It's awesome. He also is really, really good at explaining things. So I learned so much, and I learn every time he comes on and helps us with questions. Hope you learned as much as I did. Don't forget, we have these every Friday from 12 to 1 p.m. PST. You can find us on meetup.com, looking under Blockchain Underground. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share. And thank you. Together we rise. Bye. There's Mark. All right, let's kick it off. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We have Mark from Numio joining us. And last time he came and spoke to us about all the things about Ethereum and the scaling and the roadmap. And we had lots of great questions that happened back then. But today he's here to talk about Numio and also answer any other questions we might have. Mark, do you want to give a quick intro of yourself and Numio? And then also maybe like, how did you get into crypto again?
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for having me to come and chat. Had a lot of fun on the last one, so it's always great to come and do a little round two. So yeah, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Mark Anstead. I'm one of the founders of Numio. We are a non-custodial wallet built on Ethereum, primarily focused around layer 2 technologies. We were the first mobile wallet to natively support zk rollups and the first on zkSync. So you can essentially think of us as just a portal for you to interact with the layer 2 ecosystem. Right now, obviously, we're very much focused around zkSync, but we are actively building in support for some really cool new technologies for everyone to interact with inside of the app. So I guess that's a little bit of information about Numio and a little background about myself. I've been in the crypto space for a few years now. I bought Bitcoin back in 2014, had no clue what it was. Unfortunately, I sold it a year later because I was a freshman in college. And I said, hey, I don't know what this Bitcoin stuff is. I want to go out. I want to have fun. I'm a college kid. So unfortunately, I had like 2 or 3 Bitcoin at the time. And I was like, I'm better off using it for going and having fun. So, oh well. But ended up starting to work full-time in the space in 2017. I was on leave from college for about a year and a half. So I was away from school and really fell into the rabbit hole about crypto. And at that point, I got my first position leading up doing BD in sales for an organization called Cryptocurrency Investing Network. Worked with teams from ideation stage to multiple $1 billion in market cap. And then essentially decided, all right, I want to get into actually building and be a part of essentially what this ecosystem is doing and not necessarily just be like a third-party provider. So that was, I guess, the transition from myself starting to be a builder in the space, getting more involved, and started a couple companies, obviously the most recent one being Numio. And that's kind of helped transition to get me to where I'm at now. So just like in my free time within work, I actively contribute to a few DAOs. I've helped to start a couple as well. So I contribute to Index Co-op. Obviously, I contribute to zkSync. I contribute a lot with educational content about some of the other L2 solutions like StarkNet. And then what are some of the other DAOs? Shitcoin DAO, which is one of the first investment DAOs that was created back in 2020. It's a group of like 50 people who never met each other. And we were like, hey, we're going to create a multi-sig and we're going to sort of punt money into random coins on Uniswap. So that was a really fun experiment. Yeah, so I guess that's a little bit of background about myself. Again, thank you everybody for joining. More than happy to answer any kind of question, whether it's about Numio, whether it's about Ethereum, whether it's about L2, anything with regards to all that stuff. Would love to hear what you guys have to ask and what you have to say.
Well, before we do that, Mark, could you do a couple of definitions? Because some folks are newer than others. And so can you talk about what is zkSync? And because I think that's kind of interesting and people should know about that. And then just a quick high level, like what do you mean by Ethereum layer 2?
Sure. So zkSync. zkSync is one of the scaling solutions built on Ethereum. There are a variety of scaling solutions on Ethereum. Frankly, in the next couple of years, I imagine there's going to be like 50 plus different scaling solutions. zkSync, in my opinion, is one of the biggest. And they're probably going to be one of the most prominent scaling solutions. And so they launched back in 2020. They are building a ZK rollup solution, and they are in the process of launching the first ZK EVM, which means it's going to be the first EVM compatible ZK rollup. And I assume some of you might not know what that term is, and I can sort of jump into that as well. But with regards to layer 2 scaling as a whole, there are a variety of layer 2 scaling solutions. There are ZK rollups, there are optimistic rollups, there is Validium, there's Plasma, and there's state channels. So those are all regarded as quote unquote layer 2 scaling solutions, though the ones that you're most likely going to be using for the most part are most likely a ZK rollup, an optimistic rollup, or a Validium.
Awesome. And then when you talk about ZK, is that like related to ZK, like snarks and stuff like that, like the zero knowledge proofs and stuff like that?
Sure. So within a ZK rollup, there are different types of technologies that are being used. And I do want to clarify, when it's called a ZK rollup, the ZK stands for a zero knowledge proof or a zero knowledge rollup. Although one of the I guess the correct terminology for a ZK rollup is technically called a validity rollup, which kind of you'll see a lot of the people who are building these technologies, they'll like go back and forth and say, well, it's supposed to be this, but it's actually called this, which is kind of funny. So it's called a ZK rollup, but you can also hear it referred to as a validity rollup, because the reason behind that is since you're using a zero knowledge proof, specifically either a ZK snark or stark, and I'll go into detail about what those are specifically. But the reason why some people call it a validity rollup is because when a proof is generated, you know that all of the data is essentially true and valid because of, well, math. So that's essentially why you can essentially call them a validity rollup, because the data that is created, or these proofs that are created, are valid. And some of the proofs that are used within these zero knowledge rollups or validity rollups, there are two primary proofs that are used. There is a ZK snark, SNARK, and there is a ZK stark, an STARK. So I don't want to get people like too confused, but they're fairly like they're almost exactly the same. They're very similar, but they slightly differ. A ZK snark, so that stands for a succinct, non-interactive argument of knowledge, meaning succinct. So that's a very, very small proof. So it's a small amount of data. Non-interactive, meaning that you don't have to go back and forth to essentially agree on whether that data is true. And argument of knowledge, you can essentially know that it is essentially valid. And with a ZK stark, STARK, this is a little bit different. It is more focused around scalability. So it's a scalable, transparent argument of knowledge. So a zkSnark, SNARK, is more focused around privacy preservation, while a Stark is more focused around scalability. So some of the solutions that are built using a Snark, a zkSnark, are zkSync, Loopring, Aztec, Mina protocol, although Mina protocol isn't technically a rollup. Those are some examples that are using a Snark. The teams that are currently using a zkStark, there is a specific implementation within Polygon. It's called Polygon Maiden. So there's a few rollups that are being built by the Polygon team. Specifically, Polygon Maiden is using zkStarks. And then obviously the team who invented the zkStark is the Starkware team. So both StarkX and StarkNet both are using that technology. And I do know that zkSync is planning in the future to transition into using those proofs as well. The reason being is because one is more scalable than the other. So a zkSnark is able to scale linearly. So it'll just essentially scale in a linear line. And a zkStark, obviously, as I mentioned, it's more scalable. So it's able to scale exponentially, not linearly, which is really cool. So as you're able to scale more and have more and more transactions occurring, all transactions and proofs that are generated become less and less and less expensive. So those are some of the, I guess, the core differences. One is more focused around, I would say, privacy, and one is more focused around essentially scalability. Does that make sense?
At a high level, yes. You are a wealth of information, and I like how pretty technical you are. It's awesome. I'll open it up for questions. Anyone have questions you want to kick it off with, or I can just keep going? But I want to give you guys time. Steve, hand up.
Hey there, everybody. Hey, Mark. Thank you for sharing your time with us. So I've got, I've kind of loosely held on to these ideas, right? A long time ago, I had a MetaMask wallet.
Okay.
And of course, saw that the only time I could ever make swaps in there or do anything was if it was for big amounts of money, because most of it was going to be taken up by gas. And then layer 2 came along. I signed up for zkSync. I also have a StarkNet wallet, Argent, through Argent StarkNet.
Okay, nice.
And I'm kind of interested, like, well, first of all, is there ever going to be an airdrop on zkSync? Sorry, that's the candy stuff. But when it's tied, you mentioned you can't open up your zkSync wallet until you've opened up your MetaMask, right? And so it is tied to your or one of your other wallets. Is it only MetaMask that you're dealing with, or is this across a whole bunch of different platforms?
Sure. So I guess there's two questions there. One is, I guess, will there be an airdrop? I don't know. There will be a token, most likely for every layer 2 solution. Will there be a retroactive airdrop? I don't know. I hope. I've been using pretty much all of these L2s since they've launched, so I hope so. For my, I don't know, but for my personal hope, I hope so. But with regards to, I guess, the UX within MetaMask, it is mainly supposed to be used as a developer tool. So when you're looking at like the user experience for any type of interaction that you're going to have with any type of dApp, any type of other chain or other layer 2, your user experience is not going to be good using MetaMask because it is a developer tool. It's a developer application. It's built by developers for a test, for essentially testing products. Because like I'll use it to go and use in a testing environment, for example. So as a retail user, you're not going to get a very good experience there. that's sort of where companies like myself, or I shouldn't say myself, but companies like Numio, or even companies like what you mentioned, Argent, they're a competitor of Numio. I love what they're doing. And we are essentially the consumer-focused application or retail-focused application to provide that type of experience. So you don't have to go and switch back and forth from different networks. So for example, in our app, you automatically have a zkSync wallet generated for you during the onboarding process. You don't have to do anything else. We do all that work for you in the background. And sort of that's kind of the beauty of it about abstracting some of these complexities. Because if you went to go to some of your friends, loved ones, whatever it may be, and say, hey, like you got to start using like this layer 2 stuff. First, you got to get MetaMask, then you got to add these networks, and then you got to set up your account, figure out all these other things. It's a train wreck. It's not going to happen that way. Like it's terrible. And so that's why there has to be like teams like us essentially coming in to say, okay, we're going to directly onboard those people into those networks to make that process as painless as possible. And as easy as possible. I shouldn't even say painless. It's just as easy as possible. Because that is our goal. We want to onboard the next million, hopefully the next billion people into Ethereum and into interacting with DeFi and NFTs, whatever they want to do. We want to give them that freedom to do with it as they please. So that's essentially what is going on there. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, no, and thank you for kind of differentiating and putting it in context of what Numio is doing, because I've onboarded like seven or eight of my friends into crypto because they're fascinated with it. They don't know anything about it. You know, Arry was nice enough to give me all the history through the cohort that I took. And what's amazing though is how not user friendly all the stuff is right now. It's so early in this, and it's like playing Legos with, especially in the DeFi 1.0 and 2.0 spaces. Like you have to switch this, and you have to have this, and you have to take this out here and put it over here, and then you have to, you know, exchange it for this. It sounds to me like you're making the layer 2 solution much easier and not having so many parts and pieces to put together. It's more like, here you go. This is your complete product.
Exactly. So the core things that you need to have within any type of application is you don't want to have people leave whether it's a web application or mobile application. You don't want people to have to leave your product to get core features and functionalities. So what are those core features and functionalities that people are generally looking for? Obviously, number one, trading. People love to trade. People like to go and trade between like ETH, USDC, wrap BTC, pretty much any token that you want. Like that's like a core feature. Number two is NFTs. People love NFTs. That was the big thing of last year. Everybody's been talking about NFTs. People want that kind of support. And then the other core aspect is DeFi. So being able to generate yield and potentially being able to take out loans on your collateral. Those are really fascinating and powerful things that you can do through these permissionless networks. Those are like the three core facets that you have to have within any type of application to essentially be successful. And without them, it's going to be very difficult to grow and succeed, because that's what people want to have. And that's also what's causing a lot of people to either get hacked because they're going to random websites not knowing what they are, or B, it's just giving them a bad experience, because it's like, oh, you have to go to all these different types of sites. You have to either connect with a QR code. You have to do all these additional things to do these basic functions. And it just makes that process much more difficult. So like, that's why, like, when you're building out an application, and I'm saying that from our perspective, like what we're doing is we're building all of that inside of one interface, so you don't frankly have to leave the app to go and do those things. So you can go and trade inside the app. You don't have to ever leave it. You're able to manage your NFTs directly inside of the app. Obviously, unfortunately, we can't allow for people to buy and sell NFTs just because of Apple and Google restrictions. I don't even get me started. It's kind of a pain in the butt. They think of it as like trading cards, and they say that, oh, if you're allowing to buy and sell NFTs, we have to get a cut of every one of them. And we're like, well, we don't even get anything for it. So sorry, which is annoying. And then obviously within DeFi, so we have an entire DeFi dashboard that we're going to be introducing, I believe in the next 6 to 8 weeks, where you'll be able to both deposit into lending protocols, you'll be able to take out loans and repay your loans all in the same interface. And we want people to be able to do these, obviously, on mainnet, because we don't want people to be restricted from that, but more importantly, on these layer 2 networks, because that's where all the retail activity is going to occur, because it's faster, it's cheaper, better experience.
That was a really good question. At least for me. Thank you, Mark. Looks like Randy has a question. Randy.
Hey, Mark. Nice. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hello.
Also, I forgot to ask, like, as you ask questions, do a quick intro of yourself too, so Mark knows who we are. We have a pretty small group today.
Randy Calpe. I've been in this space since 2017, and so trying to figure out what I want to do in this space. So great to meet you, Mark. I guess this is more, I know it's still early on, but are you guys exploring like single sign login, like using the blockchain? I know Ethereum they've been toying with single sign login. Again, I know this is something that's way down the future, but as far as identity go, or is that something that?
Yeah. So with regard, are you talking about like signing in like with your Ethereum address, for example?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been something that I've been very excited about. I think realistically, we're probably like 2 years, maybe 3 years away from a lot of organizations beginning to adopt that.
Yeah.
Because right now we're at the point where people are starting to sort of play around with crypto. They're sort of understanding it. Most of the people found out about it through NFTs for the most part. And I would say probably the majority of people who are in the space at this point probably heard about it through NFTs, especially retail. And I would say it's probably going to take another 2 to 3 years before that, signing in with sign in with Ethereum. Like there's a project that received a grant to literally build this out. And we're a little bit away from that type of adoption coming.
Yeah, okay.
Just because all of these companies and organizations need to have enough demand to be able to warrant building that type of infrastructure in. So even some of the companies, like even Web2 companies that are very crypto focused, have very crypto focused founders and team members, and I'll use one example because I've been using their product for the last couple of weeks a lot, is Figma. The founder and CEO of Figma loves crypto, loves NFTs. He absolutely loves them. And there's no crypto functionalities that you can even do in their product. Most likely because there just isn't enough demand warranting them to do that. It took Twitter years to be able to adopt any type of crypto thing or crypto support, but people have been wanting it for years. So it's going to take time and people to literally come out and demand these things, and other people to potentially build competitors that have that support for people to warrant doing that from some of these larger organizations.
And I figured that, I mean, we don't know where this is going to go, but I know at this point that Ethereum has that network effect. And obviously you guys are building on top of it. Do you, predicting the future, but Ethereum is probably going to, in my opinion, would be around for a while. I take it that's your same sentiment too, right? With Ethereum?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So if I had to bet on it,
yeah.
I would say most likely yes, it would be very similar to Bitcoin. in that regard, I see them both succeeding very well. But frankly, we don't know what's going to happen in 5 years.
Yeah.
We have no clue. Go
Yeah.
back 5 years ago and see what some of like the top cryptos were at that time.
Right.
75% of them, frankly, you're worthless at this point. And so we don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. So it's all like the most important thing that I've learned, especially over the last year and a half, is always keeping an open mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Always wanting to learn about new technologies and learning about what other teams and organizations are building that could potentially be extremely innovative.
Yeah.
And understanding that could, I mean, it could potentially be the next thing. I don't know. But if I were to be a betting man, I would not say that Ethereum would be dead in 5 years, but I don't know. There's no way to know what will happen there.
And just squeeze over a question, just interoperability. I know Ethereum, but do you foresee, or at least a good chance, that a lot of these will be interoperable? There won't be one that rule them all, as far as, or is that the developer? Curious to your thoughts. And that's it. All right, that's all my questions.
Sure. So there I would say there's 2 projects that are primarily focused around like this term of interoperability. I think it's more so just a buzzword. Interoperability is more so, I don't really think it's going to be something that is actually achievable, because you can be interoperable within one ecosystem. There's no chain that is completely interoperable. So you can go and build, I'll say Cosmos and Polkadot. Those are 2 of like the interoperable chains. They're known to be like quote unquote interoperable, but Polkadot and Cosmos, they're not interoperable with one another. They're just interoperable with their own ecosystems. So going and saying that everything is going to be interoperable, I mean, it could potentially happen, but I would say most likely not. The only interoperability that I foresee in the foreseeable future is the ability for bridges to allow for people to move liquidity and potentially call and write contracts between different networks. But having a truly interoperable network as a whole, it's probably not going to happen, because like Ethereum, it's not interoperable with Cosmos. Cosmos is not interoperable with Polkadot, and sort of the list kind of goes on. So it's been kind of like a buzzword that's been created, I would say, over the last like 2 years with those organizations and ecosystems specifically.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Interesting. Okay, next up, Angie.
Hi, this is Angie. I actually work at OKCoin. I was a product manager, but I transitioned to become a product designer. So I'm very much interested in UX. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. I am so very interested in the frame of like UX. I think you really nailed on the lack of UX for retail users, and that lack thereof really causes people to be either afraid of it and not want to deal with it because it's a mess, right? We all know it's a hot mess. So my question is actually 3 parts. So first one, in regards to Numio, who is your target audience? And number 2, what is your, what's the team's like product strategy in terms of onboarding and education and adoption for your product? And number 3, for, lack of UX, how do we actually really address that? Like, in your opinion, what is it that companies really have to do and do right in order to really bring that awareness and make sure that can focus on building out this UX to ensure that we can really provide seamless experience for retail users?
So could you repeat those? So
Sorry.
I get involved in that one. I want to make sure I address it.
Thank you. So number 1 is target persona, your target audience.
Okay.
And number 2 is your product strategy for growth and adoption, as much as you can share. I'm always curious about what other companies are doing. And number 3, like, how do we bring awareness and expedite the improvement for the UX, amongst different companies that are out there?
Okay, cool. So sure, for our target audience, number one, we're primarily focused around people, like right now, we're primarily focused around people who are in the Ethereum ecosystem. I would say we're still a fairly small company, small team, but we're actively growing. And then obviously growing into just retail users who are buying, selling, trading crypto. Because we are both trying to apply to complete newbies as well as people who are very advanced and know this technology. So that comes down to the actual onboarding experience inside of the app. Because since we are a non-custodial product, one of the biggest hurdles for a non-custodial wallet is how an end user is managing their seed phrases, private key, or just however they're managing their keys in general. So we give people a lot of customization for that specifically. So if you're a complete noob, we can essentially help handhold you through that process and offer you keyless security. And these wallets are able to be secured and backed up and even recovered through your facial biometrics. So you're essentially creating an encrypted version of your a 3D face map of your facial biometrics. So if you lose access to your phone, wallet, whatever it may be, you can easily go and recover your account. It's super simple. But there's some people who are very privacy focused. They might not want to do that, even though we can't access any of that information. They can just go and receive a seed phrase and be off to the races. So it's applying and understanding that there are different kinds of people that are in the industry, both already in the industry, as well as people who are coming into the industry that are very unfamiliar with any of these things. So our goal during that onboarding process and even using the application is helping to educate and minimizing the complexities that they have to understand or experience. So those are some of the things that we are essentially looking to do there. Our target audience pretty much is just retail users going to buy, sell, trade, and invest into digital assets. And then for our product strategy, so we are a layer 2 focused application. So all the people that we currently have using our product, they're very much gung-ho about layer 2 tech. So what we're doing there is we have been very, very much focused around educational content. That has been a priority since day one. So for example, our team has created tons and tons of content, both written and video, educating people about what these technologies are, how they work, and just general educational content about the industry as a whole. And then that's what we're doing on the written side. On the video side, I decided about a year ago to start up a TikTok channel where I do completely free educational content. I don't do any sponsored content whatsoever. It's completely free, and I just go on there. I've probably made over 1,000 videos at this point. And I just do it because I like to help educate, and that is a part of our job as a retail focused application, to be educating our users, because we know that when someone's going to be using our product, they need to be able to go to their friends and family and say, this is what's going on. These are some of the really cool things that you're able to do also by using this tech. And it's like, okay, how do you go and explain those things? And that's where I like to come in and be essentially a resource for those people, asking questions, answering, and responding, whether it's in video or just in text, on what's actually going on, what they can do in a certain situation, and all that fun stuff. And so that's essentially what we're doing there. Obviously, with what we're doing inside of the product, we are very product focused. We love to build. The best way to build any type of product and grow organically is through development and development integrations. We have been very product focused since day one. So we are always looking to try and bring new features, bring new functions inside of the application for people to use, so we can leverage that both for our community and introduce new communities into our, I guess, our community with what we're building. And then in terms of bringing awareness, gosh, that's I guess like a very difficult thing to answer. I think a lot of it comes down to, I guess, how you want to attract people. It might be not the best thing for me to say it, but one of the things that attracts a lot of people into crypto is the ability of you're potentially able to make more money. Like that's literally why the NFT craze happened last year, was everyone was talking about, oh, I bought an NFT and I flipped it a day later and I made like 200 or 300% returns. Obviously, I don't like shilling any of that kind of stuff. I don't think that's good for the ecosystem as a whole, but there are ways that you're able to build more wealth with your money using DeFi and crypto as a whole. And those are extremely valuable things, and focusing on that and educating about that is extremely important. And I think we're starting to get to the point where more and more people are starting to realize and understand, you know what, we should probably start allocating more money into this and less into other things, because it's here. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And I think those are, I guess, some of the sort of key points there.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks, Mark. Next up, we have Nick, then Marina, then Brigitta.
Hi, I just wanted to circle the wagons on the question about single sign-on and creating a bridge between Web 2 and Web 3. Essentially being able to use your wallet address as a mechanism to log into something. That there is a very early term project that's being funded out of the Near Foundation to do that. The objective at the end is to actually put hardware in the hands of everybody that they can, and to do that for free. So you'd have a hardware wallet similar to like a Trezor or something like that, but biometrically unlocked. So it is very early term, but the objective or the output of the project is to literally turn over a toolkit you can bolt on to an Okta, an ADFS, or any of the familiar integration points you'd have with a standard single sign-on mechanism, but instead on the blockchain, and also in a self-sovereign and privacy-preserving kind of way. So instead of all your information being in somebody's database, instead it's yours, self-directed, and you have control over how it's used in the context in which it's used.
Would that be similar to something like YubiKey?
Nope, completely different from YubiKey. Actually, this is a group of, we've got probably about 10 folks right now, and one's a former Apple engineer. He's actually was behind the Apple Watch. He did Google Glass as well, and a number of other ones. He actually did the first iPod, one with the wheel. So he's kind of like a known quantity in the industry. But him, some folks from the Ethereum community, some folks in the Cosmos community, and some folks that actually came from identity management specifically, and a couple of startups have got together. We're putting a DAO together as we speak. So that's something that's very, very early term, but it was kind of interesting to hear that, because that market validation is really encouraging.
Nice.
What's the name of the project, Nick?
Xas.zone, XAS.zone.
Can you put it in a chat, please?
I sure will.
And folks, don't forget to come onto camera when asking questions. Helps. I think it's nicer. Thank you. All right.
There, so you know that I'm a real person.
Thank you. All right, xas.zone. Nick wrote it into the chat. Thank you, Nick. All right. Thanks for that. Nick, all good with comments, questions?
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. But I was especially interested. I'd love to hear more about the zero knowledge proofs, and maybe more your thoughts on the linearity of it. And it's also interesting that we're starting on an Ethereum 2 proof of stake blockchain, but I also consequently am on the Cardano Catalyst program, Catalyst Natives program, for their self-sovereign identity incubator as well. So we're trying to look at this also from a standpoint of, even though we're starting on Ethereum, we don't want to leave other chains out in the cold. So we're trying to involve ourselves as much as possible. But thank you so much for that. But I'd like to hear more about zero knowledge proofs, and especially from a scalability standpoint, because that's particularly pertinent to our project.
Sure. So could you clarify what you're looking to learn about with regards to zero knowledge proofs specifically?
Well, specifically, the hope is that we're able to prove a certain subset of information without actually giving that up. So for instance, if you need a prescription for medication or whatever, they shouldn't need to know the nature of why you need that medication, just that, Dr. So-and-so has signed for it, and that because there's a trust, or that there's a knowledge of that account on the same blockchain, that there's a zero knowledge proof that, hey, look, it doesn't matter what they have, this is what they're prescribed, and that's that. There's a number of other situations where you might want to be highly identified, but also anonymous at the same time, like online dating, where you want to prove you're an actual person behind an account that can't be duplicating accounts to kind of scam people. But at the same time, don't give up any kind of personal information, because you're entering an intimate relationship potentially. And these are the types of use cases that we're thinking about in terms of privacy preserving use cases, where we need to make sure that's an actual human being on the other end, but at the same time not divulge sensitive information that might otherwise put them at risk.
So
can I just say something? I will actually argue that the pharmacist does not need to know which doctor prescribed it. All they need to know that whoever the prescriber has been validated to be a valid prescriber.
Yes, thank you. That's probably a better, more privacy preserving way to do it. And I really appreciate you brought that up, because that's the kind of mindset that we're hoping to invite to the table in terms of design, so that we can give a very high quality, high degree of assurance for the delivery of services and how you interact with the outside world. But at the same time, we don't create opportunities for vast networks of information like Facebook that might otherwise be exploited for less than ideal means.
Gotcha. So I just sent a link in. It's called mycolorado.state.co.us. I would definitely recommend checking out what the state of Colorado is doing for digital identity, specifically around zero knowledge proofs. It's really, really cool. Obviously, right now it's more Web 2 focused. I know they are looking to transition into more integrations with blockchain, but they are directly utilizing zero knowledge proofs within this use case. So it might be applicable to specifically what you're talking about.
Oh yes, we've been looking at this one. There's also something that's a little less developed for the state of California. There's an assembly bill that is to authorize research to do a proof of concept for the Department of Education. And they're thinking about the problem where we had with COVID, where we couldn't necessarily assure that the student that was taking the test was a student or not, or that they were actually attending class. And that has consequences for the Department of Education in terms of funding that school and that district, because they might otherwise be funding a seat that was never actually sat in, and so we never actually benefited from that education. This is really valuable stuff. Thank you.
Thanks. No problem.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Hey, Marina, your hand is up. Want to introduce yourself quickly and then also ask your question or comment?
Sure. So I've been in blockchain since third Thursday in June of 2009. And I am trying to work on digital identity. Not sure what else you want me to say, Arry. So I have a few things. One, I need to, I'm curious of other people's thoughts on the things that you posted on Colorado, because it sounds like Colorado is going to control all your identity. And as we well know, government has never done anything right in their lifetime. And so if they get hacked, you're screwed. Number two, somebody, I guess Nick mentioned that XA is on project or whatever it's called, and he said that it's biometric. I'm very dubious about biometrics, because if it ever gets hacked, do you cut off your finger or do you replace your retina? Number three, I am dubious about the fact that you guys bringing up the bridges between Web 2 and Web 3, but not the bridges between different blockchains. And number four, of course, my favorite subject is, and I'm sorry, I was late. So if you already talked about it, just ignore me. But and I quickly looked at it because I was trying to listen at the same time. But basically the way you bring in the prices down is you bundling up the transactions on ETH.
So yes, so we're using a technology which is called ZK rollups. So your transaction costs are about 100 times less.
Right, but you basically rolling them up, right?
Yeah, so you essentially are like bundling up a bunch of transactions.
Yeah. And so I am curious, first of all, why did you choose that instead of optimistic, for example? And I'm not exactly sure why. I have thoughts, but I'm not exactly sure. And if you already talked about it, just skip it, because I don't want to bore everybody else. But why, when you bundling them up, the ZK rollup is necessary?
Sure. All right, so to break down some of these questions, and thank you, Ari, for writing some of them down. I sort of scribbled. So government, I guess the issues that you had with security around the Colorado ID. So these are that's all information that's already held and managed by the state of Colorado. Although I don't know, I'm not from Colorado. I live in Florida. So I don't know like the complete details, but this is from my discussion from my colleague who lives and is based in Colorado and uses it. This is all information that the state of Colorado already has, and it's already in their database. So if they got hacked, regardless of whether you're using it or not, that information could potentially be, I guess, vulnerable as it stands. So it wouldn't really make that much of a difference.
Just a clarification. Again, I didn't read it very careful. I just looked at it just now when you posted. But to my understanding, it's going to be connected to some kind of a crypto wallet, right?
No, so this is not connecting to a crypto wallet at all. It's just your digital identifier. So they're not using any type of wallet functionality in it, or at least I don't know if they're planning to. I don't know the details of it. I was just sort of sharing it because I had heard about it. Yeah. And then biometric issues, if you get hacked, are you referring to the thing that Nick mentioned, or are you referring to?
Yes. I was bringing everything up at once. And by the way, Ari, you missed the most important part of the question number 3. I was talking about bridges. Specifically about bridges.
Are you referring to bridges on like within Web3, within blockchain bridges, or are you talking about bridging between Web 2 and Web 3?
I was talking about why you're bringing up Web 2 to Web 3, but not bringing up the bridges between different blockchains.
So we were referring to signing in with your Ethereum address for that specifically. So That's like that bridge between Web 2 and Web 3. I can talk all day about bridges in Web 3 though. But I don't know if I can necessarily touch on number 2. That can probably be something that you and Nick can discuss in like the private chat. And then for number 4, why are we using ZK rollups versus optimistic rollups? So there are a few reasons. So number 1, transaction fees currently with a ZK rollup is significantly less than an optimistic rollup. A ZK rollup is able to scale higher than an optimistic rollup. A ZK rollup is able to process about 2,000 transactions per second versus an optimistic rollup, which is about 500 at its max currently. Obviously, once sharding is put into place, both of those are going to be able to scale to over 100,000 transactions per second. The big benefit for an optimistic rollup at the moment is it's fully EVM compatible, though it does have significantly higher trust assumptions, and the security guarantees are not as good as a ZK rollup as it stands. So with an optimistic rollup, it's based off of essentially trust and economic security versus a ZK rollup where its security is literally just based off of math. So if the math is correct, then all the trust assumptions that you have with it are essentially perfectly fine. It's essentially like quote unquote trustless. And over the long haul, a lot of the projects that are building around ZK rollups are going to become EVM compatible. So zkSync is going to be the first EVM compatible ZK rollup. If you guys haven't tested it out yet, it is on public testnet. It just went live on public testnet, I think like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So definitely recommend checking that out. Super, super cool. So that'll be going live on onto mainnet later this year. So at that point, literally everything that is a Solidity smart contract on Ethereum will be able to live in a scalable environment. So we are building around some of the solutions that we see being much more successful long-term, because another benefit that you can have around ZK tech is that you're able to use what's called a volition. A volition is not a term that I have mentioned already, but that is not possible with an optimistic rollup. So within a ZK rollup, you can build out a single API, which allows an end user to choose whether they want to use a ZK rollup or they can use what's called a validium. Validium is literally just, it's the same thing as a ZK rollup, but the data is not stored on Ethereum. It is extremely fast. The throughput is basically as high as you can possibly go. The transaction fees are minimal because you're not storing any data on chain. It's all off chain, and it's cheap. So you have the option as an end user, whether you want to go and say, all right, I'm going to go make 50 to 100 trades and do all of these things off chain. And once I have my balance and I'm good to go, I'm going to post that on chain. So those are some of the differences and the experiences that you can have as a benefit through a volition. And that's what you can get through products like zkSync. And for example, I know Starknet is doing that as well. Starkware was the first team to actually invent the volition. And both of those teams are both building that type of implementation. And that isn't frankly possible with an optimistic rollup. Does that make sense?
So the question I was asking about bridges is a little bit different. I posted the link of the example of the bridge that I was talking about.
Okay.
Well,
yes. All right. So this is I guess there are multiple kinds of bridges that you can have. You can have a bridge that is either like cross-chain, or you can have a multi-chain bridge. So with Polkadot specifically, you can have bridges that allow for different types of, I believe they use the term substrates inside of Polkadot. I'm not as I'm not as, I guess, my expertise within Polkadot is not as good. But I believe within Polkadot, you can have bridges so you can move funds between different types of shards or substrates within the Polkadot ecosystem. If you're looking to move outside of the Polkadot ecosystem to other native blockchains, whether it be Ethereum, whether it be Cosmos or Polygon POS or Binance Smart Chain, you would have to use what is called a bridge. Those are different kinds of bridges. One allows you to move within an ecosystem. So if you're moving between layer 2 solutions, or you can move between literally just different blockchains as a whole. Those all have different types of trust assumptions. So that is very important to sort of understand. Let me see if I can grab it. There's an awesome article that I will highly recommend everyone to read, because one of the things that I've said over the next probably year or two is we're going to start to see more and more bridges getting hacked, because it's a very new technology. It's going to be very similar to the whole, I guess, like DeFi space when it first started back in like 2020 for the most part. It like just exploded and there were tons of hacks left and right. And I foresee a similar situation happening with bridges. It's already happened over the last few months. So I would definitely recommend reading and understanding so you can know there are different types of trust assumptions that you have to have for bridges specifically. And that's going to be different from a trust assumption that you have with a blockchain.
Interesting. Cool. Well, we have 1 minute left. Brigitte, sorry to run out of time here. Can we do your question in 1 minute? And also, Mark, can you share information about how people can get in contact with you if they want to follow you or support Numio, stuff like that? Can we parallel process?
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. This has been really interesting. I just wanted to have a quick question. I'll ignore my introduction because we only have 1 minute. And it was with respect to the assumption, can we assume that efficiency in layer 2 is synonymous with more eco-friendliness? So in other words, you're only checking in with layer 1 every so often. So you're only doing proof of work once in a while, and you're doing proof of stake everywhere else, or some other consensus mechanism everywhere else. So that as we move to, 100,000 transactions per second, that is a massive leap, and that is not going to be environmentally cumbersome in any way. Is that the right assumption?
Yes, exactly. So when you're dealing with, I guess, with layer 2 specifically, the gas consumption that you have, like I'll just use like a regular transaction. To send a transaction on zkSync, it's, I believe, like 600 or 700 gas. So that is how much gas that you're spending, effectively main net gas that you're going to be spending to facilitate that transaction. To facilitate an Ethereum transaction on mainnet is 21,000 gas.
Wow.
To facilitate an ERC20 transaction, you're going to be looking at somewhere between probably 39 to about 60,000 gas. So there is an incredible decrease in gas consumption required and computation power specifically. And as Ethereum moves into proof of stake, which is aiming to occur most likely during the summer, everything is going to decrease by about like 99.9%. So everything on Ethereum mainnet is going to decrease by over 99% in terms of energy consumption and gas consumption, or I shouldn't say gas consumption, just energy. And then on layer 2, it is going to be fairly similar. You're going to have significantly less energy required for any of these transactions to go through.
Great, thank you.
Not a problem.
Cool. Well, we're out of time, everybody. Looks like Mark's, he also is on Telegram. We shared his Twitter and Numio's Twitter and also the website. So check them out, follow them, follow him. Mark, thank you so much for your time and joining us, answering questions today. I really appreciate it.
I don't see his Telegram. Do you? Is it here?
Yep, it's It's at Anstead.
Oh, yeah. I see. Sorry.
Okay. Yep.
Sorry.
So ping him with questions or connect with him. He's very, very active in the community. And thank you everybody for making time on this Friday. And I look forward to you next week. We'll have some more AMAs coming up. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you everybody for your time.
Bye.
It was a pleasure meeting you, and have a good one. Enjoy your weekend.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks a lot, y'all.
All right. Welcome to Windshield Time, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. This podcast is non-technical, fun, informative way to learn about money, Bitcoin, blockchains, crypto, and digital assets for busy parents and working folks who are curious about these new technologies. Day, Arry, and their guests talk about these evolutionary systems of money and what they do, y'all. Because what part of your life does money not touch? This podcast is not financial advice, and your reactions are your total and complete responsibility, y'all. Now, thanks again, and enjoy the show.
What are you doing?
Stuck inside.